So we're back at it again because, it's a film thing. We're at the UWI.Film program and we love everything film. We love watching them, making them, talking about them. If you know, you know. I'm Cassidy Pesce here with you today, and we want to talk about documentary and the Latin American connection. So with us today is an interesting director, cinematographer, and budding guru, Amir Aether Valen. He's a past student of the university's film program, and he's also my lecturer of cinemas of Latin America. So I'll be easy on you. He's marking me. Right, so welcome, Amir. We're glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
So just to give a little bit of background on Amir, he's a prolific filmmaker with talent in directing, cinematography, editing, and photography. And he pursued his studies at the highly competitive International School of Cinema and Television in Cuba. He specialized in documentary film direction.
Yeah.
Yes. And he also has his short film, Whispers of the Leaves, screened at the prestigious Academy Award qualifying Sheffield Doc Fest in 2021. So if y'all didn't know, that's a very challenging competition to get into, so congratulations. We're very happy to have you as one of our own.
Thank you.
So now we take a look at Whisper of the Leaves.
When I was a teenager studying at Presentation College in Chaguanas, I didn't know what I wanted to do afterward, but persons who come from prestigious, well, so-called labeled as prestigious film schools like Presentation College Chaguanas, they're expected to go into one of the three major fields that parents expect their children to go into: medicine, law, engineering.
Okay.
I didn't want to do that, but I didn't know what direction I wanted to go with my life in. But around that time in Form 5, when I was deciding what I should do and pursue with my future, there was the secondary school film festival in Trinidad, and me and my friends decided to enter it for fun.
Oh.
So we made a short film for fun, and that film ended up winning the People's Choice Award. But the whole process of making the film and the purity that we went into it with, the intention behind it, was so pure and innocent, and the reward was so high. And the reward, I mean, not the People's Choice Award, but the fulfillment that we had making the film and seeing the reactions of people who saw the film. So that was the first moment where I saw the impact that a film could have on other persons. Now, while I was studying at Presentation College, I always liked doing philanthropic work. I liked doing all of these different philanthropic groups I was in and so on. And I liked the feeling of giving back and influencing persons for the better. When I did that film with my friends and a couple other short films subsequently for fun, seeing the impact and the power that film could have to change someone's perspective really attracted me. So I didn't know what I was going to do because I didn't know anything about the film industry or anything like that. But I felt like it was a good challenge for me to have, to be able to reach a lot more persons through films than with just plain philanthropic work. And I also loved the artistic element of it. I was also always an artistic person, even though I never had an outlet to express myself artistically until film came along. That attracted me because it was kind of like a conglomeration of so many different forms of art.
Okay. Would you say that you fell in love with film during the process, or was it after when you saw everyone's reactions?
It was both. I definitely like the process more than, being like, I don't like going to a film result oriented. For me, it's more about the process of why I'm making it and what impact we are having on the person throughout the process. It must be a fulfilling process for me, for everybody involved, because the film is it's not just for me, but it's for everybody who's involved in it, all of those in front of the camera and behind the camera.
Okay, is there any way that we can see that film?
Which one?
The
The Whisper
one,
of the Wheel?
yeah,
This?
no, the one that you did at presentation.
That film lost in the archives somewhere else. I only have the trailer for that,
Oh,
but
okay.
the film itself, I don't know where that is now.
Okay. Well, what I find interesting about you is that you changed your name.
Yeah.
And you have a documentary called Who I Say I Am.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know why, what encouraged you to change your name, but before we do that, let's just take a look at a clip of this documentary.
In many cultures, it is believed that a person's name contains his or her essence. The way we dress, the places we go, the food we eat, the manner in which we behave, the way in which we portray ourselves to the world, they all begin with our identity and what we call ourselves.
Do you all know what your names mean?
Yeah.
No.
Kind of.
Yeah.
No idea. Yeah. One of the meanings that I gravitated towards was virtuous.
I don't. It's very simple. So I wish I had a more interesting name than that. I think I'd prefer something a little more extravagant.
I realized that the old people used to say that your name is kind of signify who you is, or what you may be now, boy.
I'm from South India, so we have like a long tradition of religious naming and so on. But my first name is based on the pundit's input, as well as a long line of taken names from previous, older family members. So.
But if I say Eniola, it's like, and you didn't have a shorter name than that. And I see that as a product of the process of disconnection from identity.
Wow, that was a very thought-provoking documentary. I remember wondering, like, even asking myself the questions that you asked about, like, my name, because I never questioned my name, you know? But was that your first documentary doing in UE?
Well, it was the last of our year-long activities in that documentary film class. As I'm sure you went through that class, you know how the process is. We have a couple different exercises in the UWI.Film program in this documentary year where we, take on different tasks and so on. That was the end of the year and the final documentary assignment that I did for that year.
Okay, and why? Because I heard a lot of experiences, opinions from your interviewees in the documentary. But why did you change your name? I really want to get into that.
I felt like the name that I was born with, Amir Ali, didn't fully represent who I wanted to be moving forward into the future. So the name for me, like, maybe I mentioned it in the film a little bit, like, it doesn't matter to me what other persons call me. What matters to me is what I call myself. So, I mean, you could call me ugly. It doesn't matter to me. So,
but what does it mean? What is
Aether and Valen. So I added the names Aether and Valen as middle names for the unattainable meanings behind them. Meaning, Aether has many different meanings. But the root word Aether was one of the Greek gods. He was one of the first Greek gods, and one of the meanings is that he's the personification of light, but he is also the air that the gods breathe. And I wanted to try to live up to being something like that to people. Valen is also a root word in Latin for Valentine, Valentino, Valentina, all of those names. It just means strong. And so when I call myself by those names, it's like a reminder of both the potential that I have and who I am. So I'm strong, and also I want to be the air that the gods breathe. And when I say gods, I mean like everybody who I interact with, I view them as like gods. So it's about, just trying to become a better person. I know that I will never be the personification of God of light, but I could try to be a better person in that way.
Okay, making that documentary?
Yes, it was very, very pivotal, because prior to making this film, I didn't want to be a director. I thought that I wanted to just be an editor, because it was a more technical role. I'm a very introverted person. So I thought that, just being an editor would get me a lot more jobs, to help me. I didn't know much about the industry in general, but making this film made me realize how much I wanted to be, how much I was a director, how much my mindset and perspective was of directing. So when I made this film, and also it was some of the awards that I had won, to the People's Choice Award and the United Nations Emerging Documentary Filmmaker from Trinidad Award that I won in the TNT Film Festival in 2016. Those were kind of like validating things to me. It made me realize that not only I could direct, but my peers recognize my ability as a director as well.
And you also wrote it?
Yeah.
You wrote, directed, edited?
Yeah, for that exercise, most of the things,
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
So, your decision to study in Cuba, I mean, you live in Trinidad. What encouraged that? Because that's a whole other language and everything. Like, what encouraged you to move to Cuba?
There are a couple different reasons. Primarily, after winning those awards there, firstly, the opportunity to go to Cuba came out of, it was just like a lucky occurrence that somebody who was working here at the film program, who had worked in the Cuban embassy prior to that, got word of the scholarship opportunity to study in Cuba. And it was because of the scholarship that I even considered, because I wouldn't be able to afford just picking up and going to another country and studying for 3 years. But the scholarship opportunity provided funding for everything. And I considered it because when I made this documentary that had won those awards, I thought, what next? What can I do? How can I push my ceiling? I didn't want the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival to be my ceiling. And I didn't want to have a ceiling in general. I wanted to be amongst persons who were all better than me in every way that I could learn. And I knew that I had to leave Trinidad to grow more as a person and as a filmmaker. Cuba in particular enticed me because of how scary and challenging it was. Had seen, because I didn't know anything about Cuba. I didn't know anything about Latin America. I didn't know Spanish. So the opportunity to go and study for 3 years in a language that I didn't know anything about was the most challenging thing I could do as a person at that time, and that's why I wanted to go there. Also, I wanted to grow as a director as well, because I now decided, I'm going to be a director. So I thought, going there, I'm not going to know the language, but this would be, for most people, it would be like a negative. For me, I saw it as a way in which I could learn like a baby coming into this world, like new. So for the same reasons why I changed my name, it gave me an opportunity to start with my own created identity, personal one that I gave myself. Going to Cuba was like a fresh start in that when I went there, I didn't even know the word to say, I don't understand.
No.
I didn't know how to say no entiendo. I don't understand. So when I went there, my first class was learning how to say the numbers 1 to 10 before I started the classes in documentary direction and all of the different courses that we had there. So I had Spanish classes every morning before I started my film classes. But I knew that if I learned like a baby, which is through facial expressions, through body language and these kinds of things, if I knew how to pick up those and communicate with those before even using language itself, meaning like spoken language, it would help me be a better director, because I could recognize those human cues in persons and help them to, understand what I want to say without depending on spoken language to do so.
Okay, and it brings me back to your film Whisper of the Leaves, because I don't really think it had any dialogue.
Maybe had like one line, a couple lines.
Yeah. So when you went, why did you decide to study documentary film direction?
For me, I didn't see much of a difference between documentary and fiction, apart from the form itself. And I'm happy that when I went there, it was blown, that distinction between documentary and fiction was blown even more out of the water, because when I went there, the first thing that we had to do was unlearn all of those connotations that we had attached to the word. When we hear the word documentary, we have so many different connotations for what a documentary is based on what our idea of documentary is. When I went there, the first thing they taught us was like, I had a dream that I was flying and I felt myself flying, is that not my personal truth? How could somebody say it as a work of fiction when it was a real dream that I had? Also, different persons have their own different personal truths. You might believe in Buddha, I might believe in Jesus. Who's to say your idea of truth is correct and mine is wrong, or vice versa? So different truths can
is that the Spanish accent coming out?
Different truths can exist and coexist, and documentary was the best way that felt the least rigid to me. Fiction direction didn't attract me at all because of how rigid it seemed. You had to follow the script, you had to go from point A to point B, you had to do everything by the book because of the way the directing and making a fiction film is. Documentary is much less pliable, not rigid at all. And even if I were to make fiction films, that would be the process that I would like to film. And I mean, my favorite filmmakers and directors and so on, when I looked at the time, when I looked at their work and looked at interviews about their processes and so on, like Terrence Malick is one of those who, at one time, he had a scene set out and a butterfly flying among some flowers attracted him, so he left and went to film that butterfly. But that's an outlier in this fiction process. So that very not rigid process is what attracted me to documentary filmmaking.
Okay, interesting. So like many Caribbean directors, Penny Hensel, Kamaluddin, Horace Ove, your journey as a director has been interesting and fascinating. So having traveled to all these places, because I think it was Cuba, India, Mexico, has this shaped your perspective on cinema, or specifically Caribbean cinema?
Well, firstly, thank you for comparing me to those people. Secondly,
I remember I said you're my lecturer.
Yeah. All of those places, not only those specific places, but I mean, this international film school in Cuba was a good place for me to learn and expand my perspectives, because it's a film school in Cuba, it's a Latin American film school, but it's an international film school. So in that school, in those 3 years, there were us who were studying for the 3 years, but there were also courses every 2 weeks, international courses. So persons from all over the world came in every 2 weeks for those 3 years that I was there to do those different courses. And those persons came from every continent. I met persons from every continent on earth, and also had friends, good friends, like family from every single country in Latin America, Central and South America, and the Caribbean, and North America, and Canada, all over the world. So yeah, being around those persons helped shape my perspective, because that was the first thing that I learned when I went up there and started to be around those persons, that everybody was so different. Everybody's idea and culture and so on, cultural norms was so different. In just in my year, that was for the 3 years, I had a friend from Greece and Egypt and Mozambique. I didn't even think about Mozambique as a country that much before there. I never thought I would have a good friend from Greece or Egypt and so on. But all of their cultures were so different. Even in Latin America, like the culture of Argentina is so different from the culture of Nicaragua, something like that. So those different persons with those different perspectives helped me to understand that there are many things, many different things that separate us, but a lot more things that connect us. And those points of connection was what I appreciated most going to those different countries like India, Mexico, Miami, and Cuba, and so on. So, yeah, it's more so the people, not just the country, but it's more so the people.
Okay, would you classify yourself as a Caribbean filmmaker or just a filmmaker? Because I know all those experiences could sometimes, I wouldn't say drown out, but it can affect like your input of Caribbean culture into your films. Has it?
No, because I mean, who's to say what is Caribbean and what is not Caribbean? That's
True,
my
good point.
perspective. I'm as Caribbean as you, as Caribbean as everybody else here, and they're just different. There's like infinite amount of ways that you could be Caribbean. Somebody who grew up for 30 years in Trinidad but spend the next 40 years in New York. Who's to say that I'm more Caribbean than that person? Because that person would have lived more years in Trinidad than me, even though they spent the last 40 in the United States or something. So there are so many different ideas of what it means to be Caribbean. A person from Debbie is just as Caribbean as a person from Westmoreland, but they have two different ideas of what it means to be a Trinidadian because of their cultural context. So there are infinite number of ways. I don't see the different influences from around the world as drowning out my Caribbeanness, but it just adds to the my
you as a filmmaker.
Filmmaker and person in general, my identity. But I do consider myself more of a universal person than a strictly Trinidadian or strictly Caribbean. But the experiences that I've had here in Trinidad and the Caribbean are present in all of my films, even if it's minute details, because all of those things influence everything that came before. Everything is like a trickle-down thing, like one thing influences the other, that influences the other.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to like entirely get rid of.
Yeah, unless you try to get rid of them. That's the mistake I think people make when they try to define or try to put a label on what kind of filmmaker they are. Once you start putting labels onto things, you start saying, it's a restriction. You say that you are one thing and not the other thing, which is brings me back to the name documentary as well, because that's one of the things when I decided to put those names for myself, I didn't even realize until I started speaking to more persons and getting different points of view and so on, how a name could be a label for some persons and how a name could be more than a label for other persons. So I try not to restrict myself too much.
Because has your experiences challenged the way that you think about filmmaking, especially in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, but it more so opened my eyes about how different persons outside of Trinidad approach filmmaking. The film industries all around the world are different to the way that we make films here in Trinidad. So, I mean, seeing the way and approaching filmmaking in general in Cuba and filmmaking as a student in Cuba was much different to how I would approach filmmaking now. It's just the way the industry is and so on. It has changed. Well, coming back to Trinidad, I realized there are a lot more things that I had to do by myself that in another country I might not have needed to do it by myself, because
you have a bigger crew.
I would have not necessarily a bigger crew, but also a crew who are specialized in the area that they are doing. So they are training there. They are training. When I had to do my documentary films, they were training producers to produce, cinematographers to shoot, editors to edit, sound persons, sound designers to do all of the different things of sound design and so on a much more specific and technical level that we are accustomed to here in Trinidad. So I wouldn't be able to depend on all of those things here. Not only because those persons aren't here physically, but also because I wouldn't be able to finance them anyway. I could contract persons from other countries to help win those roles, but I wouldn't be able to pay them the kind of fees they deserve and are accustomed to receiving in their own countries because of the development of their countries' film industries as opposed to here.
Okay, and you say, like, I guess here we're kind of taught to be more all-rounded filmmakers in the sense of just being capable to do every role.
Yeah, I mean, you're capable, but there's one thing to be capable in something and another thing to excel in it. So I think also that people are trained. I mean, when I went there, they taught us everything as well too. In the first year, we had to learn everything. We had to learn cinematography, sound, editing, some screenwriting, everything. In that whole first year, we didn't do it. We didn't do anything related to our specialty until second year. So the good thing about that is it gives you an appreciation for all of the other roles. So you doing a little bit of sound helps you to understand what the role of the sound person is. So when you are doing your role, directing or whatever, you could understand what their job is like and all of the difficulties and benefits and so on of their job and what their requirements are, and their needs and so on. But here, the negative is that of being just all-rounded in everything is that you can't specialize fully into one thing. Or I mean, in general, you can't do everything in a film set. All of those who work on films know that they can't do everything, but because of the mindset that you have to be in. So, for example, if I'm directing and shooting, while I'm shooting, I can't be in the mindset of a director because I'm focusing on the frame, focusing on everything that is inside of the frame. I can't be like connecting and speaking to the person in front of the camera.
Was it hard to adjust to that? Because I know in UWI we learned to be all-rounded and do...
Yeah, well, I mean, in Cuba there were exercises that I had to do both as well. So that's where I got the experience of doing on a much more deeper level of doing projects where I had to fulfill more than one role. So one particular one where I was shooting, that I had to shoot in the mountains of Cuba, that particular exercise required us to be director, cinematographer, producer, and editor. And we had one person to do sound. And in that exercise I realized while I'm shooting, and I can't direct somebody while I'm adjusting the frame. And when I say direct, I mean connect to them on a more personal human level, because I'm now working mostly with actors. I'm mostly working with real persons in documentary filmmaking, and a real person isn't accustomed to, you know, adjusting for frame and so on, and you don't want them to adjust the frame. You want them to be as natural as possible so that you capture them as authentic as possible. So, yeah.
So that was challenging for you to like just always keep in mind.
Switch the mindsets, is always challenging. But it's something that is kind of inevitable working here. If you are putting on multiple different hats and trying to do different roles, you have to be very skilled at switching those different hats and directing when and not producing. When it's you're directing, not producing, not thinking about, you know, the food and all of that.
Or even like assistant directing too. Because sometimes you fall into that too.
Well, all of the different roles. I mean, some persons always in the mindset of one thing, and they forget that, you know, that real person there that they have to connect to. So, I mean, it's always a challenge, especially for local filmmakers here, to, you know, switch out those different hats.
Yeah, because I think that goes into our film culture here, or I guess filmmaking culture. But in terms of like viewing, do you think that we have like a viewing film culture here?
Not good enough if we have one.
Well, would you say it's like what we view or how we do it? Because I know now with like streaming and stuff, you know, I wonder from from a filmmaker's perspective, what do you think our viewing culture is, and how do you like implement that into your craft?
I could say this: when I went to Cuba, and I was going to these different like small little streets and so on, these more obscure places, meeting these regular people who have nothing to do with film, regular persons in their homes. they know who persons like Hitchcock and Truffaut and Bresson and Bergman, and they know these people because they were accustomed seeing their films all of the time in cinemas and so on. And it's enlightening, but also very refreshing because I could speak to them about film in a much more expansive way, in a much more, in a way that I wouldn't be able to speak to a person. Here, if I tell somebody I'm a filmmaker, the first thing they ask me to do is if I do wedding videos.
Wow, okay.
You know, I mean, I could, but I mean, that's not what I mean when I say I'm a filmmaker.
Yeah.
So just is a switch. Just the connotation of what the word filmmaker means here is so different because of what persons are exposed to as filmmaking in general.
Yeah.
But in terms of like viewing culture specifically, it's a complicated question to answer because I feel like it's a generational thing as well. When I teach younger children, like in the UWI.Film camp that they had last year and the Film Co Youth Film Lab, just the way that they look at films is so different than the way that older persons look at films because of the attention span.
Yeah.
They are accustomed like swiping through quickly, looking at shorter material. So their whole, and I find myself guilty of this as well. It's not something that's just specifically for a generational thing. Like when I'm accustomed like just looking at short form content, when I try to look at longer films, again I have to retrain my mind to be able to sit there and appreciate what the longer form is doing for the meaning of the film and so on.
Yeah.
So it's a retraining that I think is necessary for people to appreciate different types of film, especially those more experimental types, less conventional types of films, and longer form films.
But here at UWI, we talk a lot about film culture. What does film culture really mean? Like, can you explain that to us?
I think film culture could mean different things to different persons, but I would believe here in UWI, I mean, this is a complicated question. What film culture could mean something different to me than it could mean to you. But
would you say it's like the overall love for film
for
and
the craft
like,
of filmmaking?
yeah, and I guess probably the in-depth analysis of films or something?
Maybe. The reason why I say it's complicated because for me, I look at film as a means of expressing life. So for me, film is just a way in which we could represent different things that humans go through in life, and it's a representation of humanity to me. So I try not to romanticize the process of filmmaking itself, because for me it's more important like what we see on screen and the process of like communicating to persons to help them to express that in front of the camera so that an audience could see it on screen. So I think that's why I said like film culture and so on could be different. But also I'm a person who also appreciates good film and appreciates persons who have this love for filmmaking and so on, and the process of like setting up the camera and all of that. I think it is important for persons to not put more emphasis on one over the other, not try to put all of the attention on the process of making the film and forget that we have something in front the camera that an audience needs to connect to for it to be a successful film. Well, it depends on what your definition of success is also. I mean, some persons make films just to make money, some persons make films to connect deeply with persons, and if your aim is to connect deeply with persons, some persons want to connect deeply to millions of persons. For some persons, 5 persons is enough. So it depends on different persons and what their personal goals are with film and so on. I think that would define what their film culture is like.
Okay, so what is your film culture like?
I don't romanticize the process of filmmaking so much. So, I mean, for me, my film culture or my process is trying to enrich my personal perspective so much that I have stories that I can tell. So when I actually choose to pick up a camera is because I have a clear intention of what I want to tell, because I've had the experiences, the life experiences to be able to draw from and the personal perspective that I could share and that I could connect to persons with. So like when I came back from Cuba, first thing I did was go and work in a flower shop cutting plants because that's what I wanted to do. Then I went on, I worked with migrant children and so on, teaching migrant children, and all of these different blue collar jobs and different like, regular person things. Those are the things that regular persons could connect to. I mean, that's why I think it's a trap that a lot of film students especially fall into when they come out. They started make films about filmmaking, meaning that when they go to shoot something, it's more about, you know, if the lighting is right on the person's face, if they have the right, you know, makeup and so on. And they aren't thinking if the viewer could actually connect to the person. And those imperfections are sometimes what helps the audience to connect to the persons in front of the story. So my personal film culture is very vast as well because I could look at comic book films, but I also could look at films from Andrei Tarkovsky and some of these more obscure persons also. It's very vast, and I think that's important for for persons in general to have a very varied perspective and a wider understanding of what film form is and what the power of film could do, to see these different things, to see what they connect to and what they like, and also what they don't like, which is very important as a filmmaker as well. I think it's very important that persons understand what they don't like so that they don't make those same mistakes in their own work.
Okay, was that something that you developed, that desire to really like focus on what's in front of you? Was that something that you developed in Latin America when you studied?
I think that started when I made this first film here in this documentary about names in UWI, because I wasn't aiming for that to win any awards or anything. I didn't plan for that to go festivals or anything because I wasn't even planning to be a director. I was thinking about, you know, coming and doing editing after. So because I didn't have that result in mind, and I don't like to make films to be result oriented. I don't want to make films to, you know, to get through to this festival or that festival or to make me look like a better filmmaker or anything. And that I think helps my work connect to the persons who I'm making it with. For example, when I made those documentary films in Cuba, all of the persons who worked with me, it was much more important for them to help me than it was about the film itself. So they did things for me for a film that I didn't even ask them to. Because of the relationship that I created with them, they had this trust and this confidence in me to work with them. And I'm not like, those films I went to do in Cuba were some very like obscure places, like rural areas and so on. So the relationship that you're creating with the person is what I think is most important to me.
Yeah, because, and I just want to keep bringing this up, Whisper of the Leaves, because in that film, I wasn't exactly sure what was the narrative, but it appealed to my emotions somehow. And I think it was just like the long takes and really trying to get that connection. You definitely was able to do that.
Well, thank you for appreciating that, because that was exactly what I was aiming to do with it. Because I don't think, I mean, people a lot of times, it's also because of the training that we have. Looking at films, we are accustomed to seeing narratives flow in a specific way. So when we see things outside of that, it kind of challenges our perspective and the way that we analyze those films and interpret them and so on. But people, you know, expect films to have a linear narrative and so on, but they don't expect life to be so. So they could accept that next 5 months they might be doing something that they didn't plan on doing, but they need for a film to be in a specific way. That life isn't like that. And for that specific film, those long takes and so on best helped me to convey like something that one of my favorite filmmakers, Tarkovsky, used to speak a lot about, the density of time. And people feel the density of time through those long takes uninterrupted, where in a film, if you want to move from point A to point B, you could just cut away, cut, move from one point to the next to help make this like an easy viewing experience. For the persons who were in the film, those very old persons, one was 85 at the time, one was 79, 78, they are very old, and some of them like were very sick and so on, and they feel that density of time, and the way that I could transmit that idea of the feeling of density of time was through those long takes and so on. And that's what I think the job of filmmaker is to do, to look at what somebody is experiencing, their emotions and so on, think about the idea that they want to convey, and then use the film form to express those ideas in the best way that they could do so.
So tell us about some of the projects that you have in the pipeline. I'm sure there are many.
Not that many, to be honest. It's just one. I try to focus on one thing at a time.
I don't think that's true. I think he's just hiding it from us.
No, I try to focus on because I take so long to do a project. When I do have one that I feel the urge to do. That's why I said when I came back from Cuba, I was working as cutting plants and these kind of things. So, I mean, I only do a film if I know that I have a strong urge and a feeling that there's a story here that I need to tell. Without me, it wouldn't be told in the way that I could interpret it. So the film that I'm working right now is called tentatively Garland of Skulls, about Guru of Shaktiism, which is a subsect of Hinduism that involves manifestation of deities and so on. And he's also a professional wrestler in training. But also there's like so many different layers to the story and so on that I won't go into detail about it. But yeah.
No spoilers.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years? Yeah. I don't even know where I'll be next 5 months. But
do you have plans on leaving us at UWI? Because like we can't.
No, I don't think I will ever leave this place. I mean, I might not always physically be here, but I will. For me, I think it wasn't I never wanted to be a teacher. That was the one thing that I actually didn't want to do when I was a child. I could be anything except a teacher. That was the one thing I didn't want to do. And then I spent like 15 plus years teaching martial arts, and then spending like 3 years teaching at UWI, and spent like much more years teaching migrant children and these kind of things. Most of my life was spent teaching. And I think the reason for that is because I see this as a responsibility. I don't look at this as a choice that I have. I know the knowledge that I have about certain things. And because of that, they say knowledge is power. And Spider-Man said Spider-Man's uncle said, with great power comes great responsibility. So I see the knowledge that I have as a responsibility to share it. Because if I don't, how is this whole industry going to grow? How is anybody going to grow? And I mean, I was so privileged to be in so many different spaces with so much persons who were much more knowledgeable than me, who didn't have to share their knowledge with me, and they did. Not just persons who were involved in film and education and so on, but general in life, persons share their knowledge with me, and those things that they share with me, I feel like it's my responsibility now to share it back. So I will always be here as a person who will be around helping persons in the film building and so on, because aside from the film program, I don't know of much more places that has such an impact on the film industry, helping filmmakers to grow and to develop their own film style and film culture and so on. So.
Okay, and what would be your advice to like future and current filmmakers in the Caribbean?
I think my advice would be to start to get life experiences that will help influence their perspective on the films that they make, and not focus on the craft of filmmaking. Well, not focus on the technical aspects of the craft of filmmaking more than what the heart of the story is. Story don't have to be like a conventional narrative. It could be much more sensorial or feeling oriented, like most of my films are. But I would, that's the most important thing I think people need to do, is develop a personal perspective based on their life experiences and so on. Because when your films go out there into the world, nobody wants to see a film that they have seen a million times before. They want to be seeing unique perspectives. So I mean, all of us in this room can make a film about this cup, and all of us will have a different film about the same cup, because all of us had different life experiences that shape that perspective that all of us had about this cup. So I think developing that uniqueness through life experiences will help us to know what stories we want to tell and so on.
Okay, okay. This has been a very short introduction to the multifaceted Amir. He has a wealth of experience, and I'm sure you'll be joining us again soon.
Look forward to it.
But before we go, we just want to play like a quick game.
Okay.
Right? So it's just gonna be like a this or that, right? So you're gonna choose one, your favorite, but like I'm also gonna want to guess what you're gonna choose, so we can say it at the same time.
Sure.
So it'll be like 3, 2, 1, right? So maracas or stove?
Maracas.
I was gonna say stove. Okay. Tea or coffee? Tea.
Coffee.
Oh shoot. Okay. Your favorite film? I can't try that, so I'll just let you answer that.
My favorite film is The Tree of Life.
Tree of Life. Okay. Well, is it an American film? Or?
Yes, from Terrence Malick.
Oh.
It's not a perfect film, but it is a very, I mean, I can't really explain that film too much because it's so very unconventional the way that film is. But I mean, I have a lot of favorite films. Some of them I think are much better films than Tree of Life. Some of them I maybe like a little bit more. But because of the impact that film had on me and the longevity of it, as one of my favorites, I think that's what I would say is my favorite.
So name a place you like to visit, but I want to try to answer this too.
I would like to visit?
Yes. Okay. So I want to answer this too at the same time for you.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Greece.
Peru.
Peru? Okay, okay. And what's your favorite podcast?
The UWI.Film podcast is a film thing, of course.
And any others? Or just this one? You can just say just...
Yeah, just this one, you know. I mean, why you need to listen to anything else when you have the UWI.Film podcast? I mean.
We didn't make him say that, guys. That's true.
I mean,
so anyways, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Amir, for joining us. It was a blast. Y'all know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. Bye. Oh, my God.